W.E.B. Du Bois once said, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line." Recently and historically, there have been many events that have demonstrated racial inequality. There are still many problems in schools today with students who do not receive equal opportunity in education due to their race. Even after the end of slavery and desegregation of schools, there hasn't been enough change in order to create equal educational opportunity.
After the Civil War, the Freedmen's Bureau formed in order to provide services for newly freed slaves as well as impoverished whites. One of the many services they provided was creating schools for African Americans. Under slavery, it was illegal to teach African Americans to read or write. Because of this, African Americans found it important to be able to learn how to read and write in order to be members of society, and they wanted to take advantage of their new opportunities now that they legally could. White Southerners did not allow African Americans to attend their schools, leaving the responsibility up to the Bureau to provide these opportunities. While these educational opportunities were new for African Americans and were extremely helpful and influential, white Americans had far better resources and opportunities to receive an education. For example, upper-class white Americans had access to academies and high-end educational facilities like the Lucy Cobb Institute. And looking at the picture of the White Academy on the left and the school built by the Freedmen's Bureau on the right, it's clear just by the outside of the building which school was the best quality. The primary source pictures illuminate that there was not an equal opportunity for African Americans in education in comparison to what was available to the white Americans.
In the decades following Reconstruction, battles over schooling took place in the courts. While the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause forced the states to give everyone, minority or otherwise, living in the state, equal protection of the law, many states found ways around that. An 1896 court case, Plessy v. Ferguson, made it a standard for blacks to have separate public spaces from the whites. However, the schools had to be equal in quality. For the next 60 years, many court cases examined the relationship between black students being rejected from the white schools and the conditions of the black schools. They led people to question whether the Plessy decision should be overturned. While previous cases examined the inequality in higher education, a major player, the NAACP, would get involved in a case that dealt with lower education levels. In 1953, Oliver Brown filed a case against the Topeka, Kansas School Board, as 4 similar cases were filed around the country. In a combined case heard at the Supreme Court, the Plessy decision was overturned. However, schools did not integrate right away. The national government had to step in instances, like the Little Rock Nine, to allow the black students into the previously all-white schools, and every school eventually became integrated.
After the desegregation of schools, racial inequality and educational opportunity were still being debated. No Child Left Behind, NCLB, is one prime example that many use to point out racial inequality. The NCLB Act was signed into law on January 8, 2002. Based on the 2002 law, states must test students in math and reading in 3rd grade through 8th grade and once in high school. Under NCLB, every state must put in place a set of academic standards and a state testing system that meet or exceed federal requirements. While some believe NCLB is a great addition to providing educational help to students, many others point to the flaws of the program. From a multicultural teaching perspective, many believe that the NCLB model could be detrimental to the public educational system, and on a closer level, people in communities of color and lower socioeconomic status could be affected the most by the NCLB model in a negative way. According to Carlos Ovando, professor of curriculum and instruction and educational leadership and policy studies, Arizona State University, NCLB could lead to several problems such as increasing the number of testing schools will have to perform will hurt their educational performance rather than improve it. Poor schools in poor communities will be hurt the most by these new sanctions being imposed. Rather than creating better educational services, the NCLB will cause further inequality in schools. The NCLB will try to push prayer, military recruiters, and homophobia into schools while pushing multiculturalism, teacher innovation, and creative curriculum reform out. Because of this, revisions in NCLB need to be taken to prevent this from happening in order to preserve multiculturalism and racial integration within schools. Socioeconomic inequality of schools further adds onto racial segregation on top of the NCLB.
Along with the racism in education, there is evidence of racism in extracurricular organizations. The University of Alabama Greek system remained segregated decades after the university was integrated. White Alpha Gamma Delta sister Melanie Gotts and other sorority members questioned why the alumni who helped pick recruits were not allowing African American females to join after a perfect candidate failed to receive any bids from any of the sororities. Many sorority members, including Gotts, had the impression that the girl was rejected because she was black. Despite her skin color and being rejected, the sisters in the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority wanted the bid to join. However, as Gotts said, they were just powerless over the alums. After the university admitted that some sororities rejected members on the basis of race and gaining national attention, some sororities accepted 11 African American women like Hallie Lindsay and Cammie McCann, and the University of Alabama president Judy Bonner opened a continuous bidding process in an effort to further desegregate the sororities.
Even after all the reforms and efforts put in, there is still a problem with unequal opportunity in education. African Americans have worked hard in order to gain access to education and desegregate schools, and this has somewhat helped with the imbalance. However, education still isn't equal. Low economic level schools are being further secluded by more recent acts like No Child Left Behind, which are supposed to be helping Americans, yet are doing the opposite. It may be the 21st century, but 19th and 20th century issues are still reoccurring today. Over 100 years have passed, and no large leaps have been made to attack educational inequality. Moving forward, Americans need to recognize that there is a problem with educational opportunity and begin speaking out so that society as a whole can work towards a better future.